Hangout Air is live. Welcome, everybody. We're sorry that we are 30 minutes late. We were having some technical difficulties, but praise God, we're here. We're ready to talk, and we're ready to dive into this topic of Adventists and politics. Should Adventists be involved with politics? And so before we begin to start talking, I just want to start with a word of prayer. And so I invite you to join us as we bow our heads and close our eyes. So God Almighty, we thank you for your grace and mercy and for the wonderful avenue of technology that we can be in different parts of the state and still engage in a meaningful and intelligent dialogue. And so we pray for those that are watching us, that are viewing us live. May they be blessed by what they hear and what they see. And this we ask in your name, Jesus Christ. Amen. All right, everybody, as you can see, Myron Edmonds could not be here tonight, but we have another special guest with us, and his name is Corey Johnson, straight from Barron Springs, Michigan, and he's joining us live. Corey, you want to say what's up?
What's going on? I'm glad to be a part. It's been snowing all day, so excited to be a part of this, man.
All right, man. Cool. Mike, I guess we could go down the line. Everybody can introduce themselves once again.
We going to
Kelly, Michael Kelly. Yeah, Michael Kelly.
Yeah, so Michael Kelly here from sunny California. Getting ready to catch a flight just a little bit on the way down to Trinidad. So, so going from one warm weather climate to another.
Okay. Polite.
Yo, this is Pastor Mike Polite, coming from the same boring springs as Corey on my left here at the screen. Hey, you guys, glad to be back for another week. But this week, to our moderator, if my joint starts going in and out, don't leave me hanging, man. Put up some sign, let me know, bro. The audience won't mind.
Yo, man, we about to do you like on First Take. What's that show? The show when they mute the people when they can't talk anymore. We're gonna start muting
Around the horn.
Around the horn. That's it. Pastor Davis.
Hey, everybody. Rebecca Davis here. Can you guys hear me? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm sure you can hear me.
From Atlanta. Just glad to be back with you guys.
All right. Cool. So last time we left the show, we recommended the book Politics of Jesus, and I think it's fitting that we ended the show that way because this topic is about Adventists and politics. Should we get involved with this? Should we even be near it? I mean, running for office and things of that nature. As most of you already know, Pastor Keith Goodman is running for office. He's running for mayor of Philadelphia. So, we want to talk about this topic and see, what are our thoughts? How do we feel about us jumping into politics? So if anybody wants to jump in first and start talking about, should Adventists be involved in politics? Straight up.
Now, just to clarify,
well, first I want to.
Yeah, maybe I just need the clarification as we dip in. There's a difference between being involved kind of in it and holding a political office. Which way do we want to kind of jump in it too? Because obviously we need to be involved in politics. Being involved in politics could also, in some people's mind, mean voting. Some people would look at that as being involved in politics. So maybe if we can narrow it down a little bit, do we mean holding office, since we did mention, Pastor Keith, or what do we think with that?
Well, let's start with holding office. Let's start with that, and then we could probably transition into should Adventists be voting, or the other part of what you were bringing up. So should we be running for offices?
Yeah. For me, I would say yes. If you have the skills, the background, the educational background to be able to do so. And the reason I say that is because being a part of politics and being a politician sometimes has a very negative connotation attached to it, which is why I think we're sometimes afraid of it. But if you really think about it, what does a politician do? It can help with the policies of that city, that state, that nation. And a lot of those policies affect the communities in which we pastor. And so sometimes some of the best ways to erect change is to be at the table where the conversation about change is taking place.
True. Anybody else want to jump in?
Yeah, I would say that I think from what I've heard from a lot of people, with the drawback about running for office is that, politics may force, you to compromise or to sign on to things or to really play the dirty political game in order to progress or in order to win elections. But in my opinion, I think that as Christians, there is a certain way ethically that we're called to govern ourselves, whether we are being in politics or whether we are mechanics or whether we are lawyers or whether we are doctors. Every career, even ministry, has temptations to act unethically in order to push an agenda. And so I think that more than politics being evil, sometimes we have politicians, you know, who act unethically and immoral. And so it's not the position that will force someone to compromise with who they are, what they believe in order to move forward, but it's really the person. We're called to be Christian in all of our dealings, whether it's political, health-wise, or any kind of career that we go into. And I think that's the call, is to be a Christian and hold Christian ethical values no matter what career path you take.
Got it. I'm feeling that. So, all right. So we're saying, are we all in agreement that Adventists, or matter of fact, Adventists should be in the political arena, that we should be running for offices, trying to get seats of power in order to, I guess, according to Corey, push an agenda that's ethical, in line with the scriptures, and, you know, kind of be an influence, not just in our church, but in the communities that we're in.
Yeah, so I want to, if I could comment on that, Jamie, on that question. Can you hear me well? Is it okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Perfect. Man, there's a proverb that says the path that you take to avoid disaster is the path that will lead you to it. And as I'm looking at that, man, I really think that Seventh-day Adventists are going to fulfill their own prophecy. If we look at our eschatology, we're all bracing for the time when legislation comes against worship on Saturday. And we are projecting in the future that something's going to happen that causes the governing bodies to come together and actually legislate when worship should take place. And we believe that that worship will take place on Sunday. Problem is, if it's going to be legislation that oppresses us, then it seems to suggest that we need to be making friends with legislators. And if we are going to do that effectively, that means we have to get in offices. And if there's anything that's going to oppress Seventh-day Adventists, it's going to be the fact that when those legislations come to the floor, there are going to be none of us there with any friends on the floor to try to persuade them otherwise. So in that sense, I see us as pushing forward a self-fulfilling prophecy of being oppressed when we then follow that eschatology with the understanding that we should not be a part of the political process.
That's good. That's good, sir. That's good, Mike Polite. I agree. Hold on.
That's it. We can end the show now. It's over. Mike Polite. So, but all right. So then let's check this out. I'm the member sitting down, and I'm just like, man, Adventists don't belong in that arena. Simply because God is in control. God runs things, and we don't have any business mixing with that kind of getting engaged in that kind of stuff. What's the response to that? Because we do have a lot of members that are like that. We do have a lot of people who think that, you know, no, Adventists should never be around that because God's in control.
Well, you know, and I use this also for the military argument where they say we are conscientious objectors, where we don't carry weapons when it comes to, you know, to fighting for freedom and stuff. Well, imagine if we ran an evangelistic campaign for the military and baptized all of them and they became Adventists. By that standard, would we just think God is just going to sit back and allow our borders and country to be protected because all of our military no longer is going to carry with them weapons? My point being is very clear in this sense, that God is going to do his thing as he's always done it through people. Daniel's in a political office. Joseph is in a political office, and God uses us at times for different times in Earth's history to get across his various points. So for me to say that God is going to take care of it, we shouldn't be involved, would be the equivalent of me walking by someone on the street who's hungry and saying God's going to take care of it. Well, let me get some food if I have it, bring it to them, and be a part of action. And I think that's what we miss from the political discussion, that we have an opportunity to be at a table and present another idea, another way of thinking to people who are going to influence laws and legislation. I think just real quick also, though, to Mike's point, one of the problems we do have is in our eschatology and the way we look at prophecy is we believe that those laws are going to be passed regardless, so why should we even be in the conversation? It's going to take place anyway. And my rebuttal to that would simply be, even if that's so, I would like us to be at the table to plant seeds of righteousness, and not in a Bible study sense, but the way we conduct our business, the way that we do things politically would be different. Then when those laws are passed and we are persecuted, people would say, you know what, but I used to sit at the table with that person, and they never tried to push their agenda in a mean way. Let me see what's going on with them. So I think it's absurd to think that God is just going to do it without using the agencies he set up to do it, and those are human beings.
I think you can't leave out the fact that while we're talking about this, we can't skirt around the fact that a lot of our members think like this because of some of the things they may read in Ellen White's writings. And so I think we have to tackle, what she says about Adventists in politics and different things like that before we could really go forward.
Yeah, and you're right about that, Rebecca, that a lot of people, and how can I say, in the times that we live in and how we always talk about the government will do this, the Sunday law, and all you guys brought it up. I think it too that it's absurd to just say, let's sit back and do nothing. Because if we're talking about justice, right? And as Mike was saying, both Mikes were saying, if you talk, and Court, all of you are saying the same thing, that if you're talking about justice and turning laws to help people to get the things that they need, you have to be in that arena. You have to stand up and say, okay, I got to take a step further there. I got to get more seats of power and be able to have more influence so that people can see, like, look, things need to change, things need to happen. And so, the one thing that I want to talk about is that whole, what Mike brought up about members not voting, like things like that. Because I remember when, my past experience, I've had many times where I had to get down the pulpit and be like, yo, y'all need to vote. You need to vote. I figure it's like this. If you take taxes out of my check, you best believe I'm going to vote. If I got to pay taxes at the end of the year, I'm voting. I'm not leaving this up to just this thing that is going to happen anyway. I'm going to vote. So, let's talk about this whole thing about voting and exercising our power at the ballot box and things of nature like that.
Well, if I can jump in, Adventism is an interesting message, and I think that it's received different culturally and how we take it. I think that for African American people, historically, the church has always been tied to the community. Mm-hmm. And so, Adventism is a call, just in a simple way, out of Babylon, I guess, or is a call out of, a call to the church, a call to truth, a call to a deeper understanding of Scripture. Mm-hmm. We think that people struggle with joining our church, especially in the indigenous black communities, because they don't want to accept our theology or our doctrine. But I would say that it's maybe as much sociological as it is theological, in the sense that the church is not just a place where they learn Scripture, but a church is a place that talks about their schools and their neighborhood. The church is a place where the pastor sometimes may have marched, where they gave out this, that, and a third. And it may not be an issue with our theology, but our sociology. And so I think that for a lot of times with Adventism, when we're calling people out of their church, in a sense, it can seem as if we're disconnecting people from their community. So, for instance, we have Adventist schools. And so if our children goes to Adventist school growing up, then we may not view issues in the school system as our issue. You know what I'm saying? And so I
Yeah.
think because of that, we don't really see the need to care about who's on zoning boards and which decides where goes where, or who is, or what's happening with school reform, or who's the school district president, because it doesn't affect us as much as it may affect people who are not a part of our church.
Right. Right.
I say that I agree with that, but I also have to state again that I just think that a lot of our mentality has been shaped around things that Ellen White has said concerning politics, whether we should get involved, voting, whatever the case may be. And I think you have to address it. Now, I think that some people kind of, focus on just a few quotes from her concerning that. I don't know if you guys know of any quotes that she's said, but she has a few quotes out there as it relates to politics, some for, some against. But I've only heard growing up or otherwise, the negative ones about voting, politics, whatever the case may be. I'm just wondering what you guys think.
Well, I've always heard. I mean, the one that I know is that we're not supposed to endorse a candidate from behind the pulpit. Those are the ones that I've read and that I've seen. And I mean, and I can understand that about endorsing certain candidates that you don't want to probably, I guess, sway the congregation to go a certain way. But I know there are other ones out there. Probably should have done my due diligence in finding them. But the point that I wanted to make was that you got to always look at culture and context. And if we're talking about, like I said, the title of this show is Justice Speaks. And I think within the culture and the context that we're in, we need to be, especially as Corey brought up, as African Americans, like we will go out and vote for Obama, but voting for Obama is not like the main election. It's the main election, but it's not the most important election. Your city councilman, your mayor, your judges, these are the people that affect us directly. Obama's just in the office, dealing with the overall scheme. But it's these people in our local areas, and to sit back and to say, we ain't gonna vote, man, that's a travesty in my opinion.
Well, and I want to share, a little bit about, what we're doing at Rubidoux actually on the 28th. In the city of Riverside, we've had in our lower income neighborhood, statistics have shown that every year in the last 4 years, voting has gone down. So actually our outreach is going and encouraging people in the community to vote for Black History Month. And I think what you said is so important. There's a scene in the movie Selma where they were really I think it was with LBJ and Martin Luther King, and he was like, it's so important for us to get this right to vote, not for the presidency as much, but like you said, he said, because if we can get rid of this sheriff and these judges, then the things that are happening in Selma are going to be different. And so what I think for our people is I'm never going to encourage people to vote for a specific candidate. I'm not going to necessarily invite the candidate prior to his election to my church. But what I will do is encourage everyone to exercise their God-given right to vote, which would include researching the candidate and seeing how each candidate might better reflect the mission that they believe would best help accomplish what we feel needs to be done to better uplift the city.
Am I missing something? I think I am, because I feel like at the end of the day, we're talking to an audience or to a people who, a denomination, who fundamentally just disagree with, who don't believe that we should engage in voting. So to encourage them to exercise their right to vote, to me, doesn't necessarily make sense unless you're targeting the root of why they actually think that way. And so for me, if you don't target the way why they actually think that way. I mean, there's a reason we feel like voting is wrong. There's a reason we feel like politics is wrong. Am I off?
No, you're not off, Rebecca, at all.
I mean, what I wanted to say was, sorry, Mike, I had to jump. If I could jump in real quick, that it's so awkward to me because every 4 years we vote. We go to these outskirts of society. We sit down in a hot sun and we vote for somebody to be the president of our church. Matter of fact, this year we're going to be in a political arena at the GC voting for somebody to be a president. So to say, you know, we're not going to be involved in politics is totally contradictory, because every 4 years we are political. And matter of fact, we are building up to be political up to those. As soon as we vote in the next person, we are beginning to get political and looking for the next person to vote in, because that's who we didn't want to be president. So it's contradictory to be like, oh no, I'm not going to vote in society. I'm going to let people tax my check. I'm going to let them decide what kind of schools and my property stuff. But no, I'm not going to vote. God is in control. But if that's the case, then God is in control of who's going to be president. Don't vote for that.
But Jamie, it's not a contradiction. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry, I just had to jump in. That was on my heart.
Oh, no, it's no problem. I'm having technical difficulties on my end.
Yeah.
But it's not a contradiction. I would actually disagree on anyone who tries to suggest that our political process is a contradiction to our theological stance. For one phrase has bailed us out: separation of church and state. So many will say it's not a contradiction because we're separate. We're functioning on our church side and they're functioning on the state side. What I want to suggest is that separation should not be seen as disassociation. And that whole in the world but not of the world, I think is really going to push us on this political process and the traditional Adventist take on the political process. Because I think individuals feel as if separation of church and state means I disassociate myself from the workings of the state.
Yeah, and Mike, but this is what I say. I don't believe there is a separation of church and state. I don't think the church can exist without the state. I think it's a term that we use, but technically your church can't exist if the state or the government want to come down and be like, yo, we shutting you down. In a heartbeat, we'll be shut down. And if I go and speak about homosexuals or something that is politically incorrect, I mean, they could come in and be like, yo, you're losing your tax exemption, and we're going to start doing it. So, you know, I hear what you're saying, that we have this idea in our brain that there's a separation of church and state. But the reality is, to me, in my opinion, there's no such thing as religious freedom. There's just religious tolerance. And what I mean by that is the moment a state or a government can't tolerate you anymore, that's when they will vilify you. And a perfect example are the Muslims. You know, the media vilifies Muslims as if they're all jihadists and terrorists, when they're very, quite frankly, nice people. And so at the end of the day, if the government doesn't like us, they'll just vilify us and be like, look at those Adventists. They are against what the movement is trying to be.
And
so
I want to agree with you, Jamie. I agree with your stance, but I don't agree that the average person is going to see it as a contradiction based on our understanding of separation of church and state. I want to say this one last thing, and then I'll let other people jump in, because I think this is a good point for all of us to take on. Man, I really think that there is an issue when it comes to, there is the major issue of brewing, because Rebecca is right. The issue is psychology. And Rebecca, I don't think you're missing it. I think you're exactly right. Our theology is pacifying our members to not get involved and move forward a Christ-like agenda in our governments, in our civic leaders, and for our civic leaders in their offices. And until we look at the fact that by and large, throughout human history, Christianity and conservative religion, period, has been used to pacify the masses and keep them from participating in political process, then we will never be able to get churches to get involved in that process. It goes back way before just now having an issue.
You know, but as much as I agree with that, and I want to give people the benefit of the doubt, that is it's such a cop-out if you would think that way. Because we as a church, even if you threw out politics, we would absolutely completely agree with the fact that it's wrong for the Jim Crow laws and all those things that were enacted, slavery. And the way that those things were dealt with and taken care of was through a political process. It was the Emancipation Proclamation, the Constitution, all those things were political. And what we were seeing is that people were being oppressed. There were rights being taken away, and it wasn't that we sat there and just prayed them away. God raised up people, and if we continue to have the attitude that God isn't going to use us, I mean, God's never going to, obviously, so you know, I say it that way, that if our attitude is God's going to take care of it, what we're also saying is God's going to take care of it by everyone except an Adventist. And to me, I just don't understand how anybody with the theology of going into the world and understanding Matthew 25, hungry, visited me, in prison, all that stuff, cannot see how when those laws are making it so that more black boys are being sent to prison than any others, and we're not going to be at the table to start to change those laws. I mean, to me, that is the biggest cop-out, and again, it goes back to a separatist, elitist kind of ideology. We'll sit back and allow everyone else to make sure we get our freedoms to do what we want to do, but we don't want to get our hands dirty, because that's for the worldly folk. And I think it's arrogant, and I think that is one of the reasons why the church in North America is not growing like it should.
I think that also we can't strip ourselves from our sociology. Our founders and most Adventists, I think, who really portray and teach our people as black people what they should believe in terms of political involvement, are people who are not forced to depend on the government and politics for their everyday life as much as the people that we're called to are going to be called to pastor. And I think that's a huge part as well. If your children are not affected by the schools, if your children aren't affected by the police force, if your children aren't affected by social welfare or housing or food stamps or anything, then of course your belief is going to be, and it's easy to portray an idea that you don't need to be involved, you need to vote, because it's not your people. And so I think that deeper than just a theology, there's a sociology behind, well, these are the people that are being affected by the government. And everybody's not being affected by government activity or lack thereof in the same way. And I think that that's where it's not just about theological ideas, but rather how we view government as people fundamentally.
Yeah, good point, Corey.
I think it goes back again to the issue of separation of church and state. I think at the end of the day, historically, the Christian community took such a strong stance because they couldn't to fight against a notion that politics is an end-all, be-all. That you know, all problems are solved in getting involved in politics and, you know, legislation and different things like that. And so they take this strong stance and say, no, I mean, God is the end-all, be-all. I mean, he's the cure for the human condition, you know, this and the other. So I think they may have taken that strong of a stance because they just couldn't reconcile it within themselves. And even though I agree with what Michael Kelly's saying, with what you're saying, Corey, that you know, at the end of the day, I do think that we have to move past that. But I think historically that might be, you know, exactly why they took that strong of a stance, even though I disagree with it.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
That makes sense.
And, you know, also piggybacking on our conversation last week, you know, part of what we talked about was this idea of social justice and that, you know, being involved in that, the difference between charity maybe and justice. Justice deals with the system. You can never deal with the system without being involved in politics.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
I do want to suggest also that the definition of justice, and this is why, Corey, I'm understanding where you're going for sure, and I'm even liking some of the points you're making about sociology. I just think that in large part, theology is sociology. I know we try to compartmentalize, cut and splice a little bit, theology being talk about God, but I think when we're talking about God, we're really talking about what he thinks about people, what he thinks about humans. And so when you have a theology that makes you feel as if God is not for you being a part of this process, when you have this story being told about pilgrims who are coming to this country to get away from a state that was oppressing their religious freedoms, when you start these narratives in people, it builds sociology. And I saw a great definition on Twitter about what justice is. The individual said, justice is what love looks like when it speaks out in public. And that's Adventism's problem. We are not willing to speak out in public against oppressive systems based on a theology that was fed to us by oppressors, and now we are passively watching our communities get destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to say this too, that the sociology and the theology go hand in hand. We get our sociology from our theology. And I also think that our theology, and not maybe, I don't know about the white church or, other churches, Asian or whatever, but in the black church, our theology has become so selfish that 99% of the songs that we sing is about name it and claim it, my blessing, give me, receive it. So it's all about us.
Yes,
And I
sir.
think another point that we don't realize is that when we vote on behalf of those who cannot vote. When I put my ballot in the box, or when I click that, whatever it is, I'm voting for those prisoners whose votes have been taken away because I'm fighting for them. I'm voting for the disenfranchised and the marginalized. So it's not just a vote for me. It's a vote for the best candidate I believe that can help those who cannot vote, because that's an injustice in America, that when you are a prisoner, you lose your right to vote. So when you look at the prison system, you look at justice, you look at all of these black and brown bodies that are multiplying inside the prison. When they come out, they can't receive financial aid, they can't vote anymore. And here we are as individuals, African Americans, have the audacity to say, I'm not going to vote, when you had people in Selma that were beat up, slapped, punched, and kicked just so that you could make it to the ballot. So I think that's a selfish part that our theology has become, that everything is about me, 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 me. Take me to the king. When am I going to get back what the devil stole from me? I got to reach down and pull it, all this stuff. And there's nothing sociological or anything about those outside of us that's calling us to, as Mike is stating, this whole, Mike, Corey, and all of you are saying, that this concern for those that are not immediately with me, but those that cannot do what I can.
I don't know. I agree and disagree. I feel like at the end of the day, for us, it has become God against politics, not necessarily, us against social justice. I think it's like how can I explain? I think historically, it's a battle between whether God is really the answer or politics is really the answer. I think, again, and I stated this last week, I think we deal with injustice in our own way. And again, I think we could do much better. So don't get me wrong. But I think it's been an issue of God versus politics. So we don't get involved in that whole process. We want to do it the way we want to do it, deal with social injustice the way we want to deal with it. But we are not. God trumps politics every single time. He is not okay with the political process. We should not have anything to do with it. I think that's the stance that we have taken over the years.
Yeah, but and it's ridiculous because it's both and. Now, does God need politics? No, but God doesn't need human beings either. But guess what God has done? He decides to use them. And so these are just different tools and things are at his disposal. I think the greatest example, even though it's not a political story at all, but God could have easily rolled the stone away. But he told them, roll the stone away. Why? Because he said, you rolling the stone away shows your involvement, your faith that I'm about to do something big. And I think it's the same thing with politics and with voting. God saying, okay, what do you believe? What do you want to see happen in your community? Roll the stone away, go out there, get involved, and watch me do the rest. I don't think any of us are saying on here, and if whoever is watching, I don't want anyone to get the impression to say that if we vote or if we get involved in politics, that somehow takes God's sovereignty out of the equation. No, what it actually does is it just places me at the table so that God can speak through me to people that I normally wouldn't get a chance.
I think we have to start speaking more to that, because at the end of the day, I feel like you're going to be able to convince me, easier that I'm supposed to be involved in social justice. I'm supposed to be. Oh, I understand that. I mean, you can show me that in the Bible. You can, but you have not. You got to convince me that I should be a part of politics. Like, how does that?
And that's what I think gets me, because one of the biggest books in our church is the book of Daniel, and Daniel has a political office, and not only does he have a political office, he has a political office in Babylon. and God was with him in Babylon.
Right.
I mean, completely there. I love how one of my pastors who was with me not too long ago. I remember when Daniel's obviously he served that food, and he says, "I'm not going to eat that food. Let me eat the other stuff, and I'll be fine. We'll be 10 times smarter." But when Daniel officially gets his position, now he's the one who's in charge of setting the diet that everyone else eats, and so he doesn't get that unless he's at the table. And so my whole thing is for us to say that we can't be involved. There are so many places in history. Joseph being involved in a political office saved his people from the famine because he was able to enact and use God's wisdom to carry out his office, as opposed to having other individuals in office who are driven by all kinds of other things. Let's put some people who are there in office who are Christians. I'm not saying necessarily pushing Christian agendas, because that's a completely different conversation. But I need a Keith to be the mayor, because I want to know that Keith, as the mayor, has a heart for God. Not that he's going to allow his Adventism to influence his politics, but his Christianity to influence the way that he does politics. Not his legislature, but the way he does it.
Yeah, and in Romans 13, I'm going to read Romans 13, 1 through 3, from the Message Bible. It says, "Be a good citizen. All governments are under God. Insofar as there is peace and order, it is God's order. So live responsibly as a citizen. If you are irresponsible to the state, then you are irresponsible with God, and God will hold you responsible. Duly constituted authorities are only threat if you're trying to get by with something. Decent citizens should have nothing to fear." And so with that text that I interpreted from what Paul is saying, as a citizen, it is your responsibility to be a good citizen and all of those rights that come with it. But yet still Paul says all governments are still under God. So be it. If you are a good citizen and you're voting, God is still sovereign. God is still in charge. But we occupy ourselves until we come and we exercise our rights as citizens, as human beings, as living here, with the overall arcing theme that we know God is in control of all things. And I agree with you, Mike, that I need a guy like Keith Goodman in office. I need a guy like Keith Goodman, who I know personally is going to be concerned with the interest of those, the least of these, to make sure that they can get the things that they need. So I'm all for Adventists running for offices, and gonna kind of twist the conversation a little bit. We talked about Pastor Keith Goodman running for office. What about our good friend Dr. Ben Carson, who is going for the big office? And so it's been on media. He's running for the big office. Now, what I've been hearing from a lot of people is they don't want him to run because of the light that it will be shed on our church.
I got to go catch this flight, so maybe this could be my closing statement. I actually love the fact that he would run, because I think if that's what he feels a call that he can erect change, is great. But there is going to be a light on our church, and to be frank, there's some stuff that we're going to have to answer for. So I can imagine one of the first questions that they're going to ask him on Fox News is, tell us about America being this lamb-like beast that you all have talked about, and how will that influence you in the office? So I think it's interesting. But for me, just in closing, as I got to catch this, if God lays on our heart to be put in a position of power, I think we need to move for that, not for the power, but because of what we will do at the table and at that particular seat. And hopefully that is why people are seeking different offices, not simply for the power, but to be in a position of power so that they can erect change that would help the community and the churches around.
Yeah, got it. Anybody else thoughts on that?
I do want to speak to Ben Carson. My first question is, has he officially declared his candidacy?
I'm not sure, but I'm assuming he said something, because the reports are out saying that he's looking forward to running. I don't think he's officially made a public statement.
And I just wanted to make sure that distinction was made, because there are a lot of people who talk the talk, right? And then it comes around to it and you don't see him. Man, when it comes to Ben Carson, the one thing I do like is I think a lot of people in Adventism praise Barry Black for getting involved with the shutdown of our government and how that was affecting so many lives and so many households, right? But we only supported him from the standpoint of he did what a good old Christian boy is supposed to do. He prayed. And you see how God used that thing? And man, I was just a little bit ticked at the fact that nobody listened to the other stuff he was doing in interviews, to the other things he was doing at different conventions and meetings around the country, speaking to ways that we need to get involved in this process beyond prayer. Ben Carson is doing that. Now, whether you agree with his views or not, whether you feel as if he is going to be a positive president if he were to win, I think that's a different conversation. He's probably going to hurt pretty bad on his foreign policy and things of that nature. So he has a mountain to climb. At the same time, it shows us that we are to do more than just pray, that God is trying to partner with us. He does not want just belief, but he wants belief plus action, which is faith.
I agree.
Yeah, I agree.
I would add that Rebecca made a good point about in discussing Ellen White's influence on our views on politics or whatever. And I think that there's a misconception that the church or that Christians don't have an agenda. And so I quickly looked up James White when they were dealing with the issue of prohibition in America. He did a speech that said, you all need to vote in favor of prohibition. And he says, we express our deep interest in the temperance movement now going forward, and we are instruct all of our ministers to use their influence among our churches and with the people at large to introduce them to put forth every consistent effort by personal labor and at the ballot box in favor of the prohibitory amendment of the Constitution which the Friends of Temperance are seeking to secure. He says that. Then they asked Ellen White. Because they said that she when he gave the speech. So then they asked Ellen White, do you agree? And she said yes. She said, I told them, I dressed and found I was to speak to the point of whether people should vote for prohibition. I told them yes and spoke for 20 minutes. And they said that she never, Ellen White Estate says she never changed her position.
Wow.
Obviously, there was a moral, Christian, Christ-centered agenda that both honored God and helped people, that they said use your personal labor and explicitly vote, and she never said don't ever stop voting. And so I think it's not about the act, it's about the spirit behind the act. Just like it's not about the candidate, it's about what the candidate is pushing. And so I think that there is an agenda or issues as things that are not just social, but as Pastor Polite said, our theology matches our sociology. And so if Dr. Carson has things that honor God and will help with the lives of people, I think that we have good counsel from Ellen White and a principle that says that you all need to not just pray, as Pastor Polite said, but vote at the ballot box. And so, well, I guess that goes into question, where do we get this Ellen White idea of not voting from? Like, where did that come from? Because that's
and I think I do want to speak to I do want to, Corey, I think, man, I love the fact that number one, you gave that reference. Before I continue, can you say where you were reading from so everybody doesn't think you were scratching that in handwritten?
It came from the Ellen White Estate, and the quote from James White came from the Review and Herald, July 5th, 1881. And Ellen White's response that said, I dressed and found I was to speak on the point whether people should vote for prohibition. I told them yes, and she spoke for 20 minutes on that. She talks about that in Temperance, page 255.
Man, I thank you for that, brother. So everybody knows that's legit. That's legit.
That was good.
Now,
that was good, Corey.
What I lament and mourn is the fact that conservative agenda, as Corey just said, Christian agenda, is now being more aligned with the oppression of lower socioeconomic groups here in America. And I hate that. I hate that if someone says, I'm a conservative, then immediately they're put on the side of Republicans who seem to have an agenda that's benefiting the rich but hurting the poor. And I think that there is, if there's a need now, there is a great need for individuals to take political office and push a new conservative agenda. A conservative agenda that is not about sustaining or maintaining the economic power of a majority group, but instead is about the alleviating of different types of social stresses placed on oppressed groups, marginalized groups in America.
And I think we need to just go ahead with that, redefine our definition of church and state. So it's not, I mean, it's we are not to bring our beliefs and doctrines to church and state, to, you know, whatever the case may be, but we should be a part to help, like Mike Polite said, to alleviate, social injustice or whatever the case may be. But I think we need to go back to redefining how we view church and state, and not just take a hard stance against politics, but to say we don't believe we should impose our beliefs, or whatever the case may be, but we should help our fellow humans in the world,
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are scared of what we don't know. I think naturally we fear that, and I think definitions of certain things cast that fear of how we look at politics, of what we think politics are, and what we've seen of politicians. And so that kind of paints the picture that, if you're a politician, then that means, you're swaying left and right. You can't be upright. You can't be this, or you can't be that. And so that's why we kind of shy away from it. But I think, like everyone's saying here, that the definition of politics and getting into politics, whatever way it may be, because I believe Jesus was political. He didn't hold an office, but I think his actions on earth were very political in challenging systems, like when he overturned the tables in the temple, when he talks about naked and you didn't feed me, hungry, when he told, when he was always going against the Pharisees and scribes, who were systems that were set up. He was very political. When he said, "Our Father which art in heaven," which was I guess a counter to Caesar, who thought he was in charge, and render unto Caesar. So I think that it's important for us to get seats of power and to use those seats to proclaim the theology that God has given to us, and that is to fight for the least of these. Because what we see in society is that you have certain individuals who have seats of power that only make the world better for themselves, if I can use that term. So that they make sure that all the laws and agendas work for their favor and their lobbyists. But we need Adventists. We need more African Americans to understand and know what their call is. And some of us are politicians, and some of us aren't. I don't think I'm made for an office. I think I'm made for the street. Mike is eloquent. I think Corey is taking the shine tonight. Corey is eloquent. Corey for president. You know what I'm saying? Corey, we have officially replaced you with Myron Edmonds. He's gone. But I just think that it's important that we are. I think we should be in every area of life that affects people. We should be teachers. We should be lawyers. We should be doctors. We should be civilians, whatever, police officers. We should be in every area of life that can impact people in a major way. And I strongly believe, and props to Ben Carson for desiring to run for office. May not agree with everything, but who agrees with what any politician says. Props to Keith Goodman, Sheila Jackson, Barry Black, Raul Ruiz. All of these are Adventists that are in political offices that are trying to fight the fight for not just the church simply, but for those that can and cannot.
So Jamie, I know we're starting to close down the show. Can you hear me, by the way?
Yeah, man, I can hear you, man.
Okay, perfect. Because I was having some issue hearing you guys. But I mean, this may be a tangent, and maybe it's a future show. But I also believe our theology has made us all feel very uncomfortable with seeking more power. And I think to have an ambition to have political office and further your authority, there has to be something in you that desires more power. I do not think that the desiring of power is wrong. And I think a lot of individuals within Adventism, even our political process, even if a person comes out and says, I want to run for presidency in our conference, immediately they are maligned as someone who has some backdoor agenda where they're slumping guys in dark alleys at night. And I'm just saying, man, I don't understand why just because someone desires more power, they now have to be put in a box as someone who is morally bankrupt. I think that those who have an agenda to further God's kingdom should have an ambition to gain more power and authority, of which they will submit still to the Creator God, but they will use that power and authority to push forward the Creator God's agenda.
So let me ask this question real quick, and that we are narrowing down. This will probably be our next episode. Mike, if I can be correct, you said our theology doesn't really support the idea or notion of obtaining power. Corey talked about sociology. Rebecca talked about sociology. Is this just a theological thing as it pertains to African Americans, or is this a holistic thing as it compares to Adventists? And why I'm saying that is because I'm just bringing it back to African Americans. Do African Americans just feel like we should not obtain positions of power? Because when you look at the hue in regards to not only in the church but outside the church, with those that have positions of power, it's not many of us, And so I'm wondering, is this a sociological thing based on African Americans that we just feel like, we don't belong there, we shouldn't go after it, but we should just settle for what we get and just be happy that, we are here?
Wait, did you ask that to Mike Polite specifically?
No, I'm throwing it out to anybody. I'm not just throwing it out.
Can I just say, I actually think it's a both and. I do think that that's probably, something that we, African Americans do struggle with. But in addition to that, I think the whole topic of or issue of power, period, challenges the Christian, because we're taught to be humble and to be meek and to be this, that, and the other. So Christians, period, everywhere, not just Adventist Christian. I think that, so when he's talking about this whole, power and political and office and whatever, I think that it challenges us because of what we've been taught. This is what we're supposed to be, and we almost look at it like we should be doormats, for just people to step on and walk on, kind of thing. And I think so that's probably challenging, Christianity at large, not just Adventists, not just blacks.
Yeah, and I want to, by the way, am I still coming in okay, Jamie? Still good?
Yeah.
Okay. I still want to not only agree with Rebecca, but push it to the realm of power corrupts. That's the understanding for most Christians. Power corrupts. So if power is seen as a corrupting factor, then many are going to say we should not participate. Jamie, I agree with you that individuals of different ethnic groups have a different theology on power than the African Americans specifically, and the darker brother overall. I also want to finalize my point by suggesting that not only was Jesus powerful, but that his mission was to gain more authority on the earth. I think that if we really get into the theology and the mission of Christ, he is trying to gain authority over death. He's trying to gain authority over death and the grave. And I think that the only reason and the only way he accomplishes gaining that ultimate authority on this planet is for him to lay down his life. We hold him up as this martyr who just simply sacrificed himself. But he even said, people don't take my life. I lay it down. Therefore, even in his death, he was exercising his own power. Christ wanted more power so that he could overcome death.
Yeah. I think this picture of Jesus as this long hair, skinny, slim guy that walks through the lilies picking, walks through the field picking corn, lilies is a distorted image of the Jesus that you read about in the scriptures, that he was a strong brother who was not afraid to exercise his power for the least of these, you know, and he used his power correctly. He used his anger for the mistreatment of others. So he wasn't like lashing out, just getting angry, but he used it to help other people. So I think that's a worthy topic to discuss about this.
And I think that I think Mike Polite, you definitely, even just what you said, have challenged my thinking a little bit. Even though I agree with you, you definitely still challenge it. And I think that if we really exegeted, you know, thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven, we would definitely come to the same conclusions that you just pointed out.
Yeah. Yo, y'all are dope, man. Y'all are awesome. Y'all got me need to go back to school and study some more. I feel like I need to get rid of all of y'all. Y'all outshining the host, which cannot happen. No, man, but this is great. This is great. I appreciate all of you. We're wrapping down, so we got about 4 minutes left. If there are any final thoughts you guys want to give before we sign off and we get ready for our next episode, this is the time now to share.
My final thought is I want Corey to return. I want him to remain on our panel. Bro, I'm feeling you, man. I'm feeling you, dude.
Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, we're glad. Corey, you got any final words?
I think it's an awesome discussion. I think that I think God is moving us, and I think that He's, even in these discussions, He's preparing us for, I think, a very important time in Earth's history. And I think that the last 2 weeks in these discussions really speak to where He wants us to be as a people in preparation for that time. So this is exciting, definitely exciting.
Nice. Becky, Pastor Davis.
I just want to say I love you guys. I hate Kelly had to run, and I hate Myron's not here today, but I enjoyed this thoroughly. So thanks again for letting me be a part.
Yes, thank you.
All right. I want to thank, we had 20 viewers tonight. We're down to 16 right now. They were able to stick it through the marathon. We want to thank you for viewing. We want to pray that you would have, be safe, that the Holy Spirit be upon you. And as we close out every episode, I always want to close out with a book that touches my heart, and I hope that it'll touch you too. And this book is called Where Have the Prophets Gone? By Marvin McNichol. And it's called Reclaiming Prophetic Preaching in America. Pastors, prophetic preaching is not simply talking about last day events. Prophetic preaching is speaking truth to power. So you got to be able to marry the scriptures with the contemporary issues that we're having today. And so these books will help you just to broaden your horizon. Remember, you can't keep reading commentaries that have been written by people who supported slavery through the scriptures, because you'll have a top-down theology. You need a bottom-up theology. And so we thank God for your viewership. We thank God for all of you. We know that you're going to go out there and change this world, and we just appreciate you. So God bless. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you next time. This is Just to Speak. Have a wonderful evening.